All right. So we last time we were watching the a discussion of RTA pro and con with some journalists and one and a couple of the administrators who have been involved in the RTA in the past. So they have some expertise on the issue, moderated by a newsman, and so should be somewhat balanced. So we're gonna go ahead and finish looking at this video. We got about another 40 minutes or so left of it. So me and Andrew will chime in once in a while on what they're saying and how we're viewing it and how we're absorbing it. So this is again RTA Next. Me and Andrew doing the watching, so you don't have to. You ready? You ready, Andrew?
Indeed. Let's watch the show.
See that if it doesn't pass, it could be a loss of 54,000 jobs. How are we kind of figuring this out?
So both of those numbers came out from an economic assessment of the impact of the projects. So those are not things that the RTA board sat around and we said, oh, it can be approximately this. Some of the jobs obviously are, there's a lot of construction jobs that are affiliated with the new project. There's a lot of continuation of the current construction jobs that may slow down or may not continue. So you lose both construction jobs, but there's also impacts on business and the economy and the potential growth. And as we said, predicting anything 20 years is extremely difficult. But what we do know historically is that improved quality infrastructure brings growth in the economy and growth in businesses. It's an attraction to companies that come here and look here. I think if you look at some of the feedback from the economic developers in the region.
Let's pause here.
What's up with the roads? We've got to have.
They're talking about the jobs creations here, and they're of course right when it comes to the construction works. Without these projects, that they will go away. Of course, if the alternative happens in the local areas, Tucson or Valley, et cetera, create their own tax and create their own projects, those construction jobs would reappear. So in those cases, it kind of becomes a political thing where it's like they could still exist, but could not, depending on the local government in that area. But the other thing is with the businesses, because a lot of the projects in RTA Next are road widenings. And that has me questioning for small businesses, because if you're expanding the roads, I think we mentioned this previously, there's less room for sidewalks, there's less rooms for parking lots. So this makes it difficult on the smaller businesses to try to attract customers.
Yeah, that certainly could be. I mean, I think part of it, and ideally, I think this is one of the sticking points, is that it doesn't really focus on multimodal and safety, and that's one of the things that pedestrians and bicyclists love is widen the road, sure, but also make it safer for us, and have more usable room for pedestrians and bicyclists so that they can patronize local businesses. And I don't really think there's a whole heck of a lot of that in the RTA Next. To be fair, there wasn't a heck of a lot of that in the original RTA.
No, not at all. And it's really a limiting factor for your small businesses, because if you have two complementary businesses, they don't directly compete with each other, they complement each other. Mm-hmm. If they're on opposite sides of the road, that complementation could just disappear entirely, because then people have to cross like Speedway or Grant, and without those safe options, people will choose not to. Yeah. Right. And that's where either having something like multimodal with public transit makes things easier, or having those pedestrian walking paths that are designed safely would help as well. But the plan does not focus on that. So it's like, yes, improving road conditions allows people to transit better. It will have a positive effect on small businesses, but there are other things we could do that could have better effects on our businesses, such as multimodal transportation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one corridor that I'm acutely aware of, because it's like right down the street from my house, is the mountain. Is it First or Mountain or both? I think it might be both. But anyways, they're going to be improving Mountain to make it a better transit corridor. But they're also going to be doing some like a grade separated bike path. And so I'd like to see more of that in the RTA, where you have not just better road safety, but better safety for bicyclists and pedestrians. and more in like commercial areas, because I didn't see a lot of improvements to like you know, serious infrastructure downtown, and I'd like to see more of that. And I didn't see any of that really in RTA. There's a couple of feeders that go to downtown, but there's not a lot of focus on making our downtown, you know, safer, more pleasant. There's nothing less convenient than driving in our downtown with all the one ways and craziness.
Yeah, I avoid Congress Street like the plague if I'm driving. I will probably choose to Uber if there's an event down there.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate because it's not just the driving, it's the parking as well. And again, this is where we need those multimodal transportation networks so that way people can get to areas and not have to worry about parking. Like parking is just not a conversation that people think about when it is hugely impactful in transit.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, one of the things that I like about RTA next is that at least to some degree, there's going to be some diminution in the requirement of parking spaces when you're opening a commercial space, and that's a recognition of the fact that people are, you know, doing more multimodal. They're walking more, they're biking more, they're taking public transportation more. And so the parking needs aren't quite as great. So, you know, it goes the other way too, because if you take up too much space with parking, you don't have room for places to go.
Right. You're absolutely right on that. And this is where, again, it goes back to the ideal situation, which is investing in multimodal. So that way people don't need parking and the land can be used for more businesses. But there just isn't the funding available for multimodal. And I understand that they didn't want to put stuff in that, but people are looking for change. And this is just not presenting any new change.
Yeah, that's pretty true. You want me to start back up?
Sure.
Both for the economy and for quality of life. We've got to improve our roads and the way we get around town.
Tim, when you hear those numbers?
Yeah, they definitely caused me to question. So my understanding from the numbers I've seen, that 48,000 number may be even bigger than total job growth in the city or county over that. That number sounds high to me. Granted, you got it from some smart economists, I believe that. But the thing that I really don't understand is the idea of, okay, if we don't pass it, so we're not spending that half cent on every dollar, that there would be a loss of jobs. That doesn't add up to me, because all that you're doing is not that half cent is still doing something. That half cent that we're not spending on every dollar could be, you know, doing anything. So how do we end up losing jobs if we don't pass this?
So I'm going to take a shot at that.
Yeah.
I would encourage you to look through the economic impact study, the Rounds Consulting impact. It's on our website. It's on the RTA next, or actually it's on the RTA website. And I think that can help answer some of that. But keep.
Oh, you know, he's accusing Tim Steller of being ignorant at this point. I think it's kind of insulting.
Yeah. As one with an econ degree, which it's just a bachelor's degree, so it isn't. I'm not as smart as whatever economists they probably hired, but the basic economic science, Tim Seltzer is right on. That half cents tax that isn't going would still be in our pockets as citizens, so we could then spend it on something else or invest it. Of course, it may not exist in Tucson. For example, if somebody used that savings, for example, at Starbucks, that would help Starbucks, not Tucson. So they're both kind of right. Like we would lose the local jobs, but the money would still be doing something for the wider economy at the very least.
Yeah.
In mind that this is the long game. This isn't tomorrow. This isn't going to happen overnight. And when you're not investing in infrastructure, that is basically the support of commerce as a whole. I mean, all aspects of the community then are going to potentially suffer because of the lack of that infrastructure or that infrastructure deteriorating. It's aging, you know, and so when you look at as time goes on, it's a very steady and gradual decline of the infrastructure that supports that commerce. And I'm summarizing. I get Mr. Rounds here to tell you exactly, because he can tell you all this stuff.
Maybe you could explain this. Is it is it saying that we will have a net loss of jobs as a result of not passing this, or is it saying that like our growth in jobs will be 54,000 less than it would have been if we had passed it? You understand what I'm saying?
I think it's the second.
Yeah.
You're talking to apparently two
No, we didn't do the study, but yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, I think that's based on the opportunity of jobs coming in the future as well. So it's not necessarily straight 54. We're still going to have some growth. Some are the immediate job losses from lack of construction projects and others. But it's done over the 20-year forecast, and they forecast so many different things in it. But
Caitlin, go ahead, Nick.
I have a question about housing and RTA, if that's all right. When I look at the projects that are proposed, the road project.
Let me pause there since they're changing topics. Here's an idea. Let's take that whole $2 billion and plow it into a commuter rail. Commuter rail between here and Phoenix. Let's just like connect up the cities so that you don't have to have a car to go between Phoenix and Tucson. Do you think that might be worth some economic development?
Oh, that would definitely, but then we would have to get the state involved, and we know as so long as the GOP is there, they will say no. It would help Casa Grande, it would help Cacho Peak, tourist area, it would help Phoenix as well. Specifically, it would help Phoenix more than it would help Tucson, actually, because Phoenix at least has the light rail, which is decently developed. It's imperfect, but it's enough to where if you don't have a car, you could potentially get around. But Tucson, if it doesn't go straight to downtown to where the streetcar is, then you're kind of out of luck for people coming down. But no, it would help greatly to have such a thing. But just internal, just for Tucson and Pima County being able to get around, just like Sarita to downtown would probably help a lot for people in Sarita.
Yeah. Yeah, just it surprises me what limited vision this thing has. It's let's improve a few highway interchanges here and there. And don't get me wrong, that's needed. I mean, I drove yesterday down I-10 to I-19 and got off at Valencia. And I swear to God, the longest part of that journey was sitting and waiting, to make a right turn onto Valencia. It was ridiculous how crowded that gets at like 4 or 5 p.m. And so there's no doubt that we need to improve our freeway interchanges. But it's just such a niggardly view of what needs to happen in transportation in Arizona in order to make us more competitive and to make our transportation infrastructure up to snuff.
It's completely car-brained. They are focusing on how to more efficiently move cars instead of thinking how can we more efficiently move people, in which case they would probably move away from cars. And we don't know exactly what sort of backroom shenanigans happened with RTA and how these plans were developed. I mean, I'm curious if there were. Obviously, I don't know, but I'm curious at how impactful any lobbying was with RTA.
Yeah, my impression, and I don't know a lot about this because they don't want to talk about it a lot, is that it was kind of thrown together without a lot of public input, really. I mean, they did have public meetings, but the final draft, comes out of a negotiation between a small group of people, as I understand it. So it really does serve, people specifically in the road building business quite a bit. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of one of the reasons we see the structure that we do. Anyways, back to it. Let's talk about housing.
It's the new plan. It really seems like a lot of them are even in growing areas on the outskirts of the metro area that maybe don't even have that much housing yet. But it seems like maybe this is in anticipation of future housing growth versus, when I look at investments in the city of Tucson, it's like continuing existing transit services. So I'm wondering, what would you say to people maybe in the city of Tucson who would think, this is accommodating to maybe future residents of the county who are going to buy a not yet built house in 15 years in Marana off the Moore Road interchange, whereas my bus service to get from, somewhere in Alvernon Road to downtown is exactly the same as it was, during RTA 1.
Go ahead. I like that. You can take this. I heard him reading, so I went to talk. Well, so Nick, I think it's both. And I think that there are thousands of lots that are undeveloped, that are platted, that are undeveloped in the outer areas, in Vale area and the Marana area. These are thousands of home opportunities. And so we all know there's a housing shortage, right? I mean, that's a very clear challenge for our region. And so the support of infrastructure for housing in general is important and a good thing. Now, when you look at the difference, it goes back to the regional approach and the regional investment. When you look at the difference between the type of infrastructure that is in these other areas, the Marana's, the Oro Valleys, the Vale, or the southeast area of the community, they're different. They're diverse compared to what's in the urban core. And that's really where that safety component, that active transportation component, those opportunities to improve the safety in those areas. We're not looking at widening, Speedway, for example, but we are looking at potentially Hawks, and we're looking at potentially other types of infrastructure to help you get to and from your bus stop. And those are the types of investments. And again, the diversity of the region really is what warrants a different approach to those investments across the board.
And I think it's important just to follow up, because Nick, you were saying it's the same as RTA1. It's not. RTA Next has $227 million for expansion, the weekday, evening, and weekend bus service hours, and expanded paratransit service. So there is continued expansion. RTA1 with a big expansion of transit. This continues that trend, and to expand the services more so that it's more viable for everybody.
Caitlin,
Well, let's analyze that.
I was going to ask.
Yeah, because that sounds to me like a lot of buzzwords and nonsense around, yeah, that's the case, but it should be the case, basically, that we're spending more money on these, bedroom communities, transportation needs than we are, in the heart of Tucson. And what they're saying basically is, yeah, that's the way it is, because we need new housing, and that's where the housing is going to be. So that's where the transportation's got to be.
I mean, to a certain degree, I understand this perspective, right? Housing is an issue. But at the same time, when they're talking about transit, they aren't talking about the multimodal like we were earlier. They're talking about bus and maybe the streetcar at best. Yeah. So the buses are still going to be limited, and people aren't going to prefer buses over cars. We're not going to see like a mass adoption of bus services through RTA Next to get those quality of life options that we were talking about with needing less parking spaces, for example. Buses aren't going to give us that. But with the housing, I think there's a much bigger issue there than just, are the connections to I-10 good enough, basically. It's like we need better jobs in Tucson, first and foremost, given the housing and cost of housing, or we need something that would fundamentally lower the cost of housing, which is beyond what RTA can do. So they're just, if anything, I could see this direction actually kind of worsening the housing shortage in a way, and keeping houses expensive, because they're having all the money go towards those roads and those further off locations, this urban sprawl type thing. So the property taxes could be higher in those areas, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I think that you just said the key words there, urban sprawl. I mean, the one vision is, let's continue what we're doing. It's successful. Let's have more urban sprawl. Let's have more suburban areas that are bedroom commuter areas, and keep people in their cars for 30 or 40 minutes for a commute into Tucson for their job or their shopping or whatnot. And we have a different vision that is opposing RTA2 as being just more of the same, which kind of they've admitted that sort of is the case, that it is more of the same, which it's got some nods in the way of, in the direction of wanting to have better public transportation systems, but it's not really transformative at all. And I think that's a lot of the critique from the no on RTA2 people, is that, it really doesn't change the name of the game in terms of density. One of the things that a lot of people want is, more density, more infill, more casitas, more duplexes, quadplexes, small apartment buildings, so that, we can have more density here in Tucson, rather than, if we need housing, let's go out to frickin' Marana or Vail to build it. Let's build it here in Tucson and build the kind of infrastructure that's needed to move those extra people around within the city of Tucson. And I think that's a big clash of visions with RTA yes versus RTA Next yes versus RTA Next no. Is that difference in the vision of where we want to go over the next 20 years is much, much different.
It's simply the case that in this political climate, regardless if you're a Democrat or Republican and independent, nobody is happy with the status quo. And RTA Next is nothing but the status quo on a piece of paper. And so it's just, I would not be surprised if it fails, just like the plan that happened last year, was it, within the city of Tucson?
Yeah, it was a 400 series bonding or sales tax initiative, half-cent sales tax. I don't remember the number that went after, 419, 451, something. But anyways, it was stuck on the ballot hastily, wasn't very well explained to people. It was mainly structured around public safety at a time when people were, kind of feeling a little bit, not so great about public safety in terms of, police abuse, people getting shot and so forth like that. And they just said, no, thanks. And it went down by, I don't know, almost a 10-point margin. I think it was pretty bad.
Yeah. I remember, not to get too side off track, but there was a lot of talk online of people saying they would have supported it if it wasn't so bundled in with the cops as well. But yeah, it's just the status quo just doesn't work anymore. And if this group had been more imaginative, had been willing to say, hey, we aren't going to do fancy new road changes. We're going to spend most of our money on maintaining our roads, but saving money instead for bigger projects like multimodal, that probably would have soared through the Tucson community.
Maybe. Yeah, but, certainly, like I said earlier, the people who were really at the table during the negotiation were the people who were interested in the status quo and continuing it,
yes,
and continuing to build roads. So, and continue to build houses out in the middle of nowhere.
And this is fundamentally why RTA kind of just needs to straight up be reformed. So that way Tucson has more of a voice. It should be proportional in all aspects.
Yeah. And when you say it's more of the same, I mean, literally more of the same. A lot of the RTA 1 projects that didn't get done are folded into RTA 2.
Yes.
So it's very much more of the same. All right, let's get back to it.
When you look at this and you hear now, when we talk about some of the expansion and things that are going to happen in front of local businesses, I know some of them have complained that, it's taken forever. People aren't coming into my storefront. How is that manifesting itself, I guess?
I mean, it's just that, right? Yeah. I mean, we see it all over county. Every time there's a new construction project or a lingering construction project, you see the stories on TV where you talk to the business owners about how it impacts them. That just is an undeniable reality of all of this. But what we do hear consistently from people is job growth and new jobs. And this 48,000 new jobs does sound appealing. But one of the things that has always struck me about Southern Arizona, and I am a California transplant myself, but we are very popular for people from other states to relocate to, especially as we see costs rising around the nation. So we're bringing all these new jobs here, but what is the plan to make sure that these jobs are marketed for and being swooped up by locals rather than by people looking to relocate for a better cost of living?
It's a great question. So I think by and large, it's an all-inclusive approach. So again, I go back to the infrastructure has to support the commerce. And so it depends, right, on what kind of commerce and what kind of conversation we're having around that job growth. But I want to touch on the impact of the businesses, because I think it's important that we at least acknowledge that. And that's, look at Grant Road. People ask me, why don't we just, get that done? What's the problem? What's the holdup? Well, if we could close Grant Road for an extended period of time from point A to point B, we'd be done. But that's not realistic, right? Because the businesses need to survive during that time. Part of the plan invests in small business assistance. So we have advocates that will go out, and we do today. That's in the current plan, and it will continue even on more robust. And when you're having conversations and say, okay, what can we do? What kind of signage can we help with? Those are the kinds of community conversations that people don't oftentimes hear or don't see. But it's also the opportunity to have a discussion, say, well, what do you think about us closing the road? What do you think about us, starting late or early to try to compress the timeframes? It's not lost on anyone how long these projects take. But when you have to keep it open for traffic, open for business, which we understand, right? That's a fact that it will delay the entirety of the project.
Mike, we got another.
Okay, let's pause.
Yeah.
So they'll keep talking of small businesses, and all I can think of is Waymo. Are you familiar with Waymo in Phoenix?
Yeah.
It is the self-driving taxi service that exists in some areas.
Self-driving is debatable. Apparently, a lot of those cars are being driven by people from Asia remotely.
Yeah, that's a thing. But the reason I think about it is if that technology, true self-driving, truly catches on, they're going to, of course, prefer the car-centric cities, and they are not going to like small businesses because they're as a taxi service, they want to get from point A to point B as quickly as possible. If they're having to deal with cars pulling out of a small business parking lot, like along Speedway or Grant, that slows them down. So the more car-centric we make it, the more vulnerable we become to these businesses of any sort of self-driving taxi to come in and say, hey, let's change things up even more so we can be more efficient, more throughput. And that's just going to hurt small businesses because it's just going to force them from not being able to get people into their stores. They're going to put gates along the roadway so people can't cross because self-driving cars do hit people occasionally. We've had that has happened in Arizona. So it's just like this whole car-centric approach just makes me worried that in the long term, it's going to bite back at small businesses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in terms of like new infrastructure, new ways that people work, it also just kind of completely obviates the point that I live with every day. My wife lives with it every day. Working from home is like becoming very normal now, and so a lot of times when people come to Tucson, they bring their job with them. Basically because they're working remote. Either they have a job lined up, but what I don't hear in RTA is obviously it's not designed for this, so this complaint is kind of here nor there, but it doesn't really pay any attention to the way that people commute now, and that's electronically. And here in Tucson, I got to tell you, our digital infrastructure is kind of shit. We have a local monopoly with Cox and the cable there. And it's really hard to get fiber here. It's not widely available. And even when it is, it's also shared use. And so it gets slowed down in the middle of the day. And so we have all kinds of issues. We searched high and low for the best and the fastest internet we could get. And even that isn't very great. We got the Purple Fiber people. I don't remember the name of the company. Anyways, it's like the highest speed stuff, and it's still not adequate. We get disconnections, we get interruptions, I don't hear anybody in Arizona talking about improving our digital infrastructure, which would be much more relevant to a lot of people.
Absolutely. I mean, I must admit, I also work from home, and just across America, infrastructure of all sorts, whether it be physical or digital, is just not good at this period of time. And nobody is bold enough to really try to stand up because there's all these integrated people and businesses who benefit from the status quo. Cox isn't going to be happy, even if we supported some other big business like Google Fiber coming in. Cox wouldn't like that, and so they'd lobby against it. So there's just too much money being made off of the status quo, and people are fed up with it.
Yeah, it's like we can't get anything done. Anyways, back to it.
I know, and it's along the same lines here. And the question was, I believe East Grant Road and North County Club widening was planned for 2016. Local businesses moved out in anticipation. Why should we trust you to complete your plans this time?
Good question.
So I'll go back over the accountability again. It's a ditto to that. But I will also tell you, I was somewhat involved in Grant Road in a prior life. Part of the conversation, in fairness to the RTA at the time, was an identification of how to fund it, right? Because if you remember, 3 years ago, there was no option because we weren't having robust conversations about when we're going to go to the voter and what the chemistry of the plan was. It wasn't just until recently that the conversation was really, how do we finish these projects? The board was committed, right? The board said, we're committed, we're ready to go. But without a funding source, it's very difficult. My suggestion to you on the accountability, I go back to those quarterly reports, 2 issues, schedule and budget. And it will be a very unpleasant conversation in front of a bunch of elected officials if one of the projects is delayed for whatever reason. It will be very unpleasant. It will be a very unhappy day. But the conversation needs to happen in public so that people know. And oh, by the way, what are those alternatives? One of the things that I've pitched to the board is the RTA may come in and say, we will help you, we will facilitate, we will assist you in delivering the program or the project. We've not done that before. to me, again, that's the accountability to make sure that these projects are delivered is the key piece to this from the RTA board, and they've demonstrated that.
I just want to throw one thing out because I want to give Mr. Tega some credit on this one too. The one advantage of having that regional approach, you've got all the decision makers throughout Pima County on that board, all the mayors, the two tribal chiefs, so you've got representative from the board of supervisors as well. This has been a conversation we've been having a lot of, and we're already leaning in on how can RTA help shorten those timelines. One of them is right-of-way construction. The right-of-way acquisition that is done by the municipalities tends to be, okay, we're going to go. Let's acquire the right-of-way. We're talking about how can we look in and maybe acquire some projects that we know this project's going to be built in this time frame. If properties become available or businesses are moving, let's help in that way. The other way is with collaboration with the utilities. The utilities are a big slowdown on a project because you get the road off finally, and then somebody says, oh, do we need to move the utilities? And now they start. That can be done in advance, at least taking a look at what the basics are of what they're going to have to do with the utilities. That's a role that the RTA had not played in the past.
Can you pause it here?
Yeah. Think the RTA board pack.
Are they just basically saying that they kind of just did a bad job with RTA 1 with proper planning, and now this time they're going to do a better job?
That's pretty much exactly what they're saying. Yeah.
Okay, I just needed to point that out.
No, that's absolutely right.
RTA, PAG and RTA are pretty much one and the same. It's just what they're responsible for. And the RTA is responsible for execution of the plan, oversight of the plan, and then collaboration with the municipalities. And we've got, as you've heard, a lot of different oversight and accountability built in.
Well, a lot of folks are looking into the plan. They're looking at some of the projects that are there in terms of widening the roads, car infrastructure, things like that. But I know, Caitlin, a lot of folks are talking about alternative forms of transportation. And Nick, a lot of folks are also talking about safety issues and where some of that money could go to make things a little bit safer. Can you guys both talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, with safety, I think it looks like the plan has two parts. There's the pedestrian and bike safety part. Then there's also $50 million for transit safety in Tucson, which would be a big change from now. I mean, the city council has a new transit safety and security plan. It's $500,000 one time. RT Next would give it $2 million every year for that. So that would be a huge change, which they mostly want to use to hire more subcontracted security, expand police patrols in the transit system, and basically redo all the bus stops, it seems like. And to that end, I guess I do have a question actually for Mike and Ted. And I know you mentioned that there are some expansions of what's being invested in transit. It was my impression that RTA was mostly continuing the weekend and night service that was implemented in RTA 1. Is it also expanding those services? And could you talk about
May know that better.
So the short answer is yes. The longer answer is it will depend on feedback from the jurisdictions. The jurisdictional partners will be a part of that. There is some additional money for expansion, but I won't be sitting here telling you it's going to be from point A to point B. I think that's part of the robust conversation with the jurisdictional partners and using their mechanisms to get public feedback.
But there is $227 million in that line. And that's the thing on that side to remember about. Caitlin?
Yeah, I mean, and you had talked extensively about the expanding of the bus services to our rural communities that need them, and the significant investment in streetcar and whatnot, and the streetcar line and its operation. But wondering how does this plan address safety and access in neighborhoods where car ownership is less common? We're seeing a generation that is moving away from cars, that is more concerned about the environment, and I think we're seeing more of that.
I'll take a stab at starting now, and then I'll turn it over to Ted. So I think when you look at safety, as I mentioned before, the $2.67 billion ask and program is around safety. And I think one of the differentiating parts is there's 31 new roadway projects in the plan, right? And so when you dissect those further, only 8 of those are capacity. 23 of those address aging infrastructure, which address those issues and those safety issues in the urban core as well. So the needs, again, we'll use an example of Colossal Cave Road. that safety need. There's a railroad crossing at grade today. There's a school right there. I mean, that is a very significant safety challenge for us as a region. You compare that to, when we use the term modernization, right? But it's really upgrading and the aging infrastructure to address those safety needs so we can get Nick to his bus stop, but not only on his bike, right? Also as a pedestrian. And those investments are throughout. So all of those projects have pedestrian and bike infrastructure, not just the one line that says it's ADA, safety and active transportation. It's beyond that.
And let's take it to a category we haven't talked about yet. And that's the arterial and the collector roads, the pavement rehabilitation. So you talk about more of the urban core. You talk about the roads that bring people into the town. And those are some of the roads that need the most investment on fixing them because they're unsafe. It's where you find most of the pedestrian deaths. It's where you find a lot of the issues with vehicle accidents. And even when they put that in, you'll get a lot of these new amenities. But the biggest factor is that something we didn't have in RTA1. The biggest complaint around here is the condition of the roads. When we finally have a way to do it, while the city's recent half-cent sales tax will focus on neighborhood streets here, this will focus on all the roads that get people to and from and around town. And it's the 177 million people go, well, that's not enough. But it's also one of the elements and categoricals. If our revenues do come in higher, remember, we're using a different estimate for what our budget is. That's going to be where a lot of any money that goes to roads will be going, because we'd have to go back to the voter to add other projects. But we know we've got roads, and every municipality, the irony about it is when we started putting that category in there, every municipality didn't have money, but every municipality wanted money to help fix their roads that were in the worst shape.
Yeah, if I may, this is it.
Yeah. Sounds to me like they're almost saying, look, we've built this in as an afterthought, because that last point that he was making there, we felt a little dismissive because he's basically saying that any slack, any additional revenue that we get beyond and above what we budgeted for, because we're budgeted differently this way, we have worse assumptions being made about how the economy is going to fare. That'll go to these road improvements so that we can fill the potholes and stuff. So it's kind of an afterthought more than built into the plan. I don't know. Was that your impression too?
Honestly, I was trying to figure out. So I was half distracted because they mentioned Colossal Road. So I was trying to figure out where is Colossal Road, and it's a part of an old Spanish trail that goes to a tourist attraction. And it's like, that's what they're focused on, is a tourist attraction road. Yeah. So I've just been thinking like that's wow, that's what they want to focus on, repairing and fixing, not all the potholes that could be on Speedway or Broadway or any of that jazz. But yeah, I mean, I do know that the way they have projected the costs, they're taking a very conservative income approach. So they're probably also thinking like more than likely we will have some buffer money. And so, yeah, we could give some money out to different things. So that's probably their logic of making it an afterthought. But no, I'm just feeling more and more like if they had just said, we're going to focus on maintaining what we have and saving a bunch of money for major changes, that would have been a lot better than just trying to do all these log rolling and pork for the different areas off of Tucson taxpayers. Yeah.
It seems, I don't know, my overall impression as to our complaints here in Tucson about the quality of the roads and the maintenance of the road and the safety of the roads is really not at the heart of the issue here. And I mean, that's not surprising because it is a regional transportation plan. And so they have pretty much just kind of sewed up the old plan in new clothes and, given it some additional bells and whistles and said, let's keep doing what we're doing, So I suppose it shouldn't be a surprise. Ready back to see what Tim's going to say?
Yep.
I think one of the highest priority questions for people, so I want to make sure it's totally clear. I had a weird experience last night. I went to an RTA meeting at El Rio and heard the explanation that a man said, hey, I'm having to replace my windshield every year or something like that because it gets smashed from stuff in the road and potholes. And they explained, I thought, that no, we don't fix potholes. That's not what RTA does, but they do. We plan to repair. This is what the RTA people are saying. We plan to reconstruct the arterials in, right, okay. But then I had this experience of hearing that last night, and then today on my social media, an ad comes up from Connect Pima, which is the entity that's been formed to promote RTA and try to get it passed. And it says something about a species that we don't like, the Pima County pothole. And the whole ad is about how, if you want safer roads from potholes, vote yes on 418 and 419. So could you just make that 100% clear?
I'll make it 100% clear because the fact of the matter is a lot of the roads that people complain about the potholes on are on the arterials and the connector roads. That is the one that has the most usage. It has the heaviest vehicles that drive on. And I'll tell you, we had this argument today about the state funding. The heavier the vehicles, the more it tears up the roads. The arterial and collector as you said, rehabilitation is what it's listed as now. It is a curb-to-curb reconstruction. It has to meet an expected 10-year standard before it will need to be touched again. So it is actually doing an engineered road. You put a pothole in, and I think we've all experienced it. We know after the first rain or a couple weeks later, guess what? It's back, and it generally brings a friend. So the fact of the matter is that's exactly what that element was placed in there for. How can we fix the roads and do it under something where we're talking about construction, not just temporary maintenance?
And those are priorities.
This is not a great explanation.
Yeah.
Because it just is not clear at all about, because he's mentioned arterial roads and connector roads, and obviously we can't expect him to list out all the roads exactly right here, right now, but like to say that to voters, they're just going to go like, okay, we don't know what roads are going to be fixed. I mean, maybe they have it listed in this here giant book about which ones are getting reconstructed with that 10-year criteria.
There's not a lot of detail about what's going to happen to the roads that are highlighted as being, part of the project. You ready to go again?
Yep.
As needs arise, or how is that? Do you have that prioritized yet?
So maybe I can help with some of that. So I want to go back to our jurisdictional partner, Pima County. No offense on the Pima County pothole. I think it's really the Southern Arizona pothole. So we don't want to put anyone in a bad spot there. So I want to confirm that. But as far as the repaving goes, and are you going to see RTA funded crews out there patching potholes? No. And we can't because the statutes don't allow us to do that. So that's why, as Ted outlined, it's a 10-year life for that pavement. Now, you asked a very important question, which is, which roads are going to get done, which is a very fair and reasonable question. Well, the opportunity is for the jurisdictions to designate where those roads and that road investment is going to occur. And they do that either through their needs studies or they do that through public input. I know, I believe there was a meeting scheduled of the city's oversight commission, which they were going to discuss that and provide feedback to the city for their priorities. So we expect that will be the case across the board. And that is another opportunity for the public to weigh in.
Okay. David, I can just follow up real quick too. The intent is that the roads that are in the poor and fair position will be the ones they're going to do. So there will be some oversight from the CAR committee and the TMC. And you've got to understand that oversight between the experts and the citizens in a weighted manner is incredibly important. And so the municipalities, when they come and say, we want to do this road, it's going to have some justification behind it that road needs that. And we've got plenty of roads that are in poor and fair condition.
Okay, I'm going to get to this Slido question because it's pretty interesting. Young people have trouble affording housing and cars. Why do we continue to support sprawl versus invest more on our urban core?
I'm going to take a stab at that.
Okay.
I don't know that this plan supports sprawl. I think what it does is it invests across the entirety of the spectrum.
Okay, that deserves a pause.
Yeah.
I mean, they just were talking about how they're building out towards where new housing development is and focusing on those roads. Like, how is that not supporting urban sprawl?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know that it does support sprawl. Okay, yeah, I'm willing to let him finish, but I think that yeah, I'm not expecting much here.
Irony of this region is diverse. The urban core has certain needs that were asked earlier and I addressed in terms of some of the investments, some of the safety pieces. The areas outside of the urban core have other needs. And this plan tries to address them as best it can with a regional eye, with an eye towards the region.
Yeah, I think maybe the rejoinder that I would give here is maybe the time for regional transportation has passed, or maybe the way that we're doing regional transportation hasn't worked for the past 20 years. Maybe RTA is really fundamentally broken, and we need to rethink the whole damn thing. Because it seems to me that one of the big knocks on the RTA plan is that it really does emphasize the wealthier suburbs needs over the needs of core Tucson, and the money says that right there, because it spends proportionally so much more money in those suburb communities than in the core of Tucson.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on that. And it's like I said, just on the fact that Tucson isn't fairly represented on this board, probably would get a lot of left-leaning young voters, if they were aware of that fact, to just not support it on its face unless it was truly being bold and focusing on Tucson. But yeah, it's just crazy.
Yeah, it just I think basically he doesn't have an answer to this, is what it comes down to. Is he leans heavily on this, we gotta do this regional. I mean, we're seeing it frozen in there. Regional eye with an eye toward the region. It's just what? Okay.
Yeah.
That's what they're complaining about, is that it's paying too much attention to the region and not enough to the core. And that's his answer, is that we need to look at it regionally.
If you wanted to focus on it regionally, it's like I said earlier, for Sahuarita, they would benefit so much by having some sort of rail to get to downtown or to get to different things. I mean, I can't imagine being a parent in Rancho, I believe is the area that most of them live in, and then having to go all the way up to, what is it, the foothills, like Iron something, I think is one of the high schools up there, for a sports game. Right. But if we had proper rail system in Tucson, you could just probably have, your high school student could do that by themselves. But instead, a parent has to go through and spend all of that time and effort driving them.
It's true. But to be fair, I mean, a proper regional rail system probably costs a lot more than $2 billion.
Of course. Which, again, it's just like this whole thing of it's just not imaginative. And the fact that it isn't, and it's just the status quo, is going to make it fall on its face. And looking at the age of these two guys, I think they're a bit, sadly, and no offense to these individuals, they're just somewhat out of touch with what young voters want, which is more focus on density and more focus on environmental concerns and more focus on affordability above all of those, which is, in their eyes, not needing a car.
Yeah, indeed. All right, back at it.
And what does that regional investment look like?
Okay. And I think we want the region, we want the core, the city of Tucson, the largest municipality in this region, where the activity is, we want it that way. You don't want everybody staying in their own little world. So you have to have all of this in here that's a good blend of what we do with roads and how we do it. And it's not about sprawl, because these roads are already existing. As Mike said, there's very few what you go, oh, that's going to be a brand new road. It's improvement, extensions. Marianne, Cleveland, and Colossal Cape are two perfect examples.
Okay, got to call bullshit on that. It's not pro sprawl because it doesn't build new roads. Give me a break. I mean, the point is to increase capacity on these roads further out in the arterial system, and that does increase sprawl because it allows more people to live in those communities further out and be able to commute in a reasonable period of time. So it does support sprawl.
They're just entirely wrong on this.
Yeah.
Conversation up here right now, but now it's time to go in the audience and have some conversation with folks here. Before we open things up, we started the show again with a poll on Slido. asking if you are for, against, or undecided. If you have the opportunity now, go ahead and answer that question again based on the conversation that you've had with us right now. And then again, we have 2 mics here. We're going to ask folks to come up and ask a question. When you come down, please let us know your name, your affiliation if you have one, and limit your question to 60 seconds. And then we'll have that conversation up here with our panel. So right now, a reminder to make sure you answer that Slido question. We'll bring it back as we wrap everything up. So the first question we have down in front.
Thank you. I'm Steve Farley. I'm a public artist, longtime public transit advocate, Central City resident. I was one of the members of the original Citizens Advisory Committee for the original RTA. And we were very proud to have put in massive transit expansions, including the streetcar extension.
I'd say that if anybody can claim to be sort of the progenitor or the father of our light rail system, it's that man right there, Steve Farley. He's been involved in transportation issues for many, many years. And good public servant. He also served, the city council and as a representative, a state representative for a while.
Interesting, because it listed him as a artist.
Well, he is a public artist. And that's what he does. You've probably seen some of his pieces around town without even realizing it.
Probably.
But he's also, a very public citizen. He's been, done his job in terms of public representation and public interest formation. He's a good guy.
Indeed.
Father. And I would have liked to have seen a lot more transit expansion because I'm a transit guy. I was excited to see more than $750 million investing in keeping those expansions that we did after 40 years of failed plans before that time, and building more expansions on it. So I'm a strong supporter of 418 and 419 because I cannot imagine what is going to happen to our transit system if this fails. Losing that $750 million, I cannot imagine how that's going to slash our service across the board or dollar ride or the rest of it. So I want to know specifically what is going to happen if we don't pass this to our transit system. What kind of cuts are going to be made? Have you heard from the jurisdiction?
Okay, thank you. Mike?
Okay, so I can address that. I know that the city of Tucson just yesterday was presented an analysis of what happens to their, at least from their perspective, to the transit system should RTA next not pass. I would encourage folks to watch that. I know there's some materials that were also generated that give you an idea of some of those challenges that the city of Tucson will face. I'm gonna take a little bit of a step back and answer it this way for Mr. Farley. Thank you for the question. When the board first asked me to come on board and help out, the first order of business was, what happens if this doesn't pass? So it was really an opportunity to explore all funding, all sources of funding. What does this really look like? Can I buy us time until maybe November? Can I buy us time to have a conversation so that there's, I'll use the term gap funding. So I explored the Board of Supervisors, unanimous tax. That's an option, sales tax. So I talked to all of the boards at the time, all of the board members at the time. And I can tell you there's not support for unanimous vote on that. So, check, we went through that one. I also explored bonding through the county as an option. I had a robust conversation with the county administrator around that and her finance folks. That won't work for us because it's only for capital. So the capital, certainly we could potentially make improvements to bus stops, those kinds of things. But from a transit standpoint, that's not an option for the bonding. So then the conversation moves towards just the property tax, right? And had a conversation around that. Say, okay, let's explore that. What does that look like? The counties are regulated by the state in terms of how much money they can actually generate with property tax on an annual basis. And I believe that number is around 2% plus new construction. And so on an annual basis, their budget can grow, their tax rate can grow by that amount. And so when you do the math on that and you realize the cost of operating the county, there's no room left for transit or very little room left for transit. So looked at that. So then the other question was, well, why can't we use the regional funding that comes into the region, which is a highway user revenue fund monies? So I looked at that. And again, dead end in that we can't use that for transit operations. So then the last one was, okay, how can we use the fund balance? Tim asked about the money that's in the bank, right? That's already committed to road projects. Well, so the conversation went down that path. And so when you look at that fund balance that's been committed to complete RTA 1, the fact that these services for transit have been provided for 20 years, that's complete. The roadway component that's now under, we'll call it the commitment, have not been completed. And so the conversation is, well, can't the board just move that money and have that discussion about those dollars, right? Very reasonable question. And so the conversation then is, it doesn't mean the board can't do that, but I can tell you that the board would have to have a conversation around the voter commitment to complete the rest of the RTA program, which are those roadway projects that I mentioned earlier. So I wanted to just let you know that when someone asks about, well, what happens to the transit? And by the way, that's not a scare tactic. That's an analysis that I performed early on, very open. I mentioned this to the board in the board meetings, and I walked them through that analysis so that they understood, really explored, hey, is there a way to potentially delay this and use some gap funding?
Okay, we have another question off to our left here.
Let's pause for this question.
Yeah.
Because it does seem like this just all ties back to the GOP and the state legislature screwing us over with the statutes on how the different funds can be used. I'm assuming, of course, that the reason they can't use the different funds is due to state statute, but
and federal statutes, yeah, because he has mentioned the HERF funds, which are federal funds.
So, I mean, I do feel bad for the person who asked the question. His name was Steve
Farley.
Right? Yeah. Steve Farley. Okay. Because I understand why we would want to protect that, but it does kind of come off as a bit of a scare tactic of like, oh, if this doesn't get passed, we could lose it. But I mean, I think at the same time, Mayor Romero in Tucson would be quite in a bad position if the streetcar got shut down, for example. So
I don't think anybody's going to let that happen. Yeah.
Yeah. So somebody would do something to get funding for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think I don't think there's any question of that. The question is, how hard would it be to have that conversation? How many people would have to be moved off the ball in order to get that passed? And who's going to do the authorization? Who's going to do the actual, charging of taxes in order to get that up and rolling? And probably it would fall to the city to get it done.
Yeah, the city or the county.
Yeah. All right, back at it?
Yep.
Can you tell us your name and your question?
Hi there. My name is Paul George Blazevich. I'm an urban planning graduate student at the University of Arizona. I rent a home near the intersection of Campbell and Prince in Tucson. I want to see funding continue for these really great cycling and pedestrian safety projects, as well as public transit service in Pima County. Mm-hmm. That's why I'm excited about RTA Next. But I also do not want to see roads widen to feed continuing suburban sprawl and the destruction of desert habitat in the exurbs and suburbs of Pima County. Mm-hmm. If I were to vote no on RTA Next because of these reasons, is there a foreseeable way that I could vote yes in the future on some sort of program to only fund transit service and cycling and pedestrian safety infrastructure in Pima County?
I'll take that one. I will never say that there's never an opportunity. You may have that opportunity. Highly unlikely. You've got to remember the RTA is a regional body. I mentioned earlier, and I said it for a reason, 426 square miles is the city of Tucson. It's not all the urban core. Over 9,000 miles is Pima County in footage. The beauty, in my opinion, of the RTA is that you've got all of the elected leaders of all 5 of the municipalities, as well as the input from the tribes and the county. And they all agree this is the best plan going forward for all, for the car users, for the transit users, for the bike users, for the pedestrians. Now, that doesn't mean that the individual municipalities can't do more. If they want to, they can. I'd encourage it. I'm a big infrastructure person if they can. But when it comes to a regional transportation plan, that again, if you take a look at the 2 maps and you overlay them, you'll see there is some thought process behind where these roads are going down. They're filling in the gaps. There's still parts of the county that are going to need it. And that will have to be addressed at a later date. But the fact of the matter is, will there be an RTA and you're going to be able to collect the house at sales tax if it doesn't give everybody something in their plan they like? I think everybody could find things in the plan they're not going to like. But I think everybody's going to find something in the plan that they really like. And the question is, do you want to throw everything out because you don't like that, or do you want to really improve your portion of the community for the things you want?
Caitlin, are you hearing that too? Kind of the frustration that we can't take, the first one and then, not the second,
Or
or
a la carte menu.
Yeah. I mean, that's the beauty of elections, right? I am curious though, I guess about the branding for Prop 418 and 419. When I first saw the signs, I had no idea that this was connected to RTA because it doesn't say anything about RTA on the signs. Why is that?
You have to
I
ask.
think that's an easy answer. The question in front of the voters should be Prop 418, 419. There's no hiding it. It's all about the roads. And right now, I think the discussion, as we've seen for several years, has been all about RTA. And my concern is everybody's forgot what happened in the first 15 years of RTA. I mean, you look at Houghton, you look at Speedway, you look at La Cholla, La Piñata, Sarita Road, the TIs, the intersections to get on and off the freeways at Ina, at Ina, at Twin Peaks. That whole Twin Peaks was developed from RTA. And now we're about to complete Sunset Links. That will give us, we already know the congestion that you've got. You see in Orange Grove when you get on and off the freeway. Now we're going to have the next exit. You're going to be able to get on and off the freeway and skip all that Orange Grove light and get yourself over to River. Infrastructure and a transportation system takes long-term planning.
Okay, Mike, before we jump to our next
If
question.
you don't mind.
Yeah,
Paul, I appreciate that question. And one of the things that I wanted to bring you back to was the conversation I had earlier about the diversity of the region. I understand your perspective on that in terms of where the investment should be for the alternative modes in the urban core. Got it. I'm clear. But when you look at the entirety of the region, and as I mentioned, those examples of those interchanges, they may look like urban sprawl, but they're safety improvements. They're needed for all of us, but also for the transportation of those goods and services. You know, those tractor trailers and all the things that bring us those goods and services, whether you order online or you go shopping at the grocery store. And so it's really looking at the diversity, but keeping in mind that it's a focus and a function of safety. I just wanted to make sure that I made that comment to you, Paul.
Okay, we have a question down front.
Thank you. My name is Alejandro Angel, and I'm a supporter of RTA because while I recognize the plan isn't perfect, I do think it's different than the previous one. It has a different approach for the core than it does for the outskirts. And I also believe infrastructure is huge in bringing and keeping businesses here. Caterpillar is here largely because of infrastructure. So is Raytheon, because they got the infrastructure they need. But my question is, I think it's also important that we acknowledge that some citizen groups were really disenfranchised by the process by which this plan was developed. And I think I want to ask you, Mike and Ted, what are we doing? What lessons have we learned to make sure that we improve the process so that everybody feels heard when we develop these types of plans? Thank you.
So I'll start off with that. Thank you, Alejandro, for that question. So as I mentioned before, I think that the reporting structure of these citizens groups is extremely important. And so as you look at how the Citizens Accountability for Regional Transportation, the CART committee, is structured today and the role that they play, I think it provides a very direct line to the RTA board. I think that's first and foremost. But I also think I can point to the chemistry, the constitution of that group with the additional members that represent the city of Tucson, and then the technical management committee with the additional members for Pima County as well. And so I think that brings forth that accountability directly to the board with no filter. And it's really an opportunity to have a very open and robust conversation with the board at that time.
Okay, Ted, quick before we get to our next one.
Just real quick, I was originally on the Citizens Advisory Committee before I got appointed to the board, and it was frustrating. There was zero doubt about it. There were times I was frustrated because we weren't having the discussions, we weren't talking, we weren't moving on, we weren't moving forward. Those voices were heard. I can't tell you how many times we've talked, though, at the board level. If you sat through our meetings, you'd see us talk about it. We went back to it time and time again. I think when you look at the final plan, you'll see there was a lot more fingerprints from both plans that came out of the CAC, not just the one that ended up being the one that started to move forward. It's been adjusted quite a bit in the last year.
Okay, we have two final questions from the audience. We'll start here first.
Okay, very good. My name is Albert Elias, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to ask a question. At this point, I'm not supportive of 418 and 419, but here's my question. Why was a 20-year term proposed for 418 and 419?
Good question.
You know, you've made a big point tonight, both Ted and Mike, talking about how revenue projections, cost escalation, and project delays all had a negative impact on the original RTA. So doesn't a 5 or a 10-year term make it easier to estimate revenues and match expenditures to revenues and therefore deliver projects on time?
Well, I'm going to take the second part, then I'm going to let Mike address the first part. The statute requires that you have a 20-year plan. The statute drives a lot of that stuff. There was some discussion about going 10 years or 20 years with the tax. We could have done a shortened tax period and then come back and addressed it on that front. Here's the challenge. It sounds like it's a great idea. Let's do it in shorter bursts. The people that build the roads, a road design from design to finish generally takes 5 years. That means you'd have to do everything at the front, and then you don't have any money. Nobody's going to come in and do the work expected to get farther on down the road if there's no guarantee the money goes any farther than the 5-year point. And the reason that becomes a challenge is we can't do them all at once. And so it is a flow of continuous construction throughout over the period of the 20-year time. As a matter of fact, even in a 20-year plan, some of the projects still are going to get completed about 22. Those are start dates in the 20-year plan based on the funding that's coming in. So it's difficult. But you've got a challenge then attracting people to bid on projects that they can't guarantee that the completion money may or may not be there. And the other thing, and I could be wrong on the 20-year statute, but I'm pretty sure it requires a 20-year plan. We were trying to work, and Mr. Ortega came in and gave us a couple of proposals on how we could shorten it. And honestly, there was zero support on the board level for anything to have a 20-year plan, but not a 20-year matching funding stream. What we're trying to improve is the opportunity to then take it in shorter bites and get more changes, get them earlier if we need to, and flexibility within the plan of moving projects forward and back.
And Mike?
Albert, good to see you. Albert was one of my colleagues at the city of Tucson. So great minds. When I first came on board with the RTA back this summer, I actually proposed a shorter time frame because it seemed like that would make the most sense for all the reasons that you mentioned, right? As we delved into it, I found that the statute was a little bit of a challenge, right? But to have a plan that was different than the funding source caused incredible confusion. And so after a very robust conversation with the board, the determination was made, stay with 20 years for both, but make sure that this accountability that I've spoken to is infused in the system so that if revenues aren't coming in or if the conditions change, we can go back and have a conversation with a voter. As I mentioned, Albert, you know that that's the highest form of accountability. Thank you.
Okay, Tim, anything that you...
No, thank you.
Okay. And then our final question down front here.
I feel a little short for the microphone, so I'm going to put that down. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Vanessa Casio, and I'm with Living Streets Alliance. We're a nonprofit organization advocating for safe, vibrant streets for everybody. But I'm also a City of Tucson resident and more importantly, a mom of a 7-year-old. And I think about how wild it is that he will be 27 years old when at the end of this 20-year plan. And so I come with that perspective. We have as an organization, we've outlined our the reasons why we can't support the plan, but also just knowing that I am a mom and also an engaged citizen. One of the things that comes to mind for me is the city of Tucson spent a lot of time, resources, and engagement around developing a climate action plan. And part of that action plan is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay, do you have a question?
Yes.
Okay.
And transportation is one of the largest sources of greenhouse gas emissions. And arguably, greenhouse gas emissions also don't know jurisdictional boundaries, right? But so my question is, are there any provisions in Prop 418 to evaluate scope of proposed projects to reduce carbon emissions and discourage single occupancy use vehicles?
Thanks. Mike?
Sure. So thank you, Vanessa. I think when you look at the entirety of the plan, aside from the safe.
Short answer, no.
Yeah, I was thinking, he's doing a very good at politics, even though he isn't a politician. He remembered the person's name, but he's going to answer no in a very complicated way.
Yes, he's going to couch his no very nicely.
The component that I keep harping on, when you look at the investment of infrastructure for bike and peds, et cetera, throughout the plan, I think that does address some of those environmental concerns that you just outlined. With regard to the analysis of the impact, all of the projects will go through that, and will actually, the RTA staff, or the PAG staff, will actually analyze the impacts for all of the projects. And we have actually gone through and looked at all of post, pre, and had a conversation around that internally. But I can tell you that is not lost on us. And I think the investment in the active transportation component within all of those elements is what really speaks to that point. Thank you for your question, Vanessa.
In other words, get out of your car and walk or bike if you want to make an impact. This isn't going to do it for you. Well, maybe, I don't know if cars get more fuel efficient, but the way that our cafe standards have been going recently, that's not promising either, really.
No, it's very much in RTA's mind that emissions is not their responsibility. If everybody adopted electric vehicles, they'd be okay. If nobody adopted electric vehicles, they wouldn't bat an eye either way.
Yeah. So this one's going to get no satisfaction.
Okay, and that's going to do it. And in terms of our viewer question or audience questions, thank you all for coming up and asking. We want to go back a little bit and talk about our Sligo question. At the beginning,
did they move the needle?
At the very top about whether or not you support it, you opposed, or you were undecided. To give you the results before, it was 55% that supported it, 5% opposed, and 40% were undecided.
You have a prediction?
Because this was a couple weeks ago, I'm going to say it's going to be relatively the same.
I think opposed is gonna grow gonna grow more than support in any case, and decided it's gonna go down a little bit.
After this conversation, which I certainly appreciate everybody here, the support for the project is 2%, opposed is 13%, and undecided is now 5%. So I want to thank everybody for coming.
If that audience is at all indicative of people's reaction to hearing explanations of RTA, we could be way off in thinking that this may not pass.
Yeah, potentially. But I mean, we also don't know. I mean, the people who would attend something like this is an AZPM. It is a local politics thing.
Yeah,
it's people who probably don't work, for one, right? Because I can't tell what time this was hosted, but if it's anywhere around working hours, just no. Young adults or working people aren't going to attend a meeting like this. But yeah, we don't know if it's a truly representative sample, is what I'm saying, of the voters. But
no, I don't think it is. But that movement of almost 30% to the yes column is wow. That surprises the crap out of me, really.
Yeah, it does. But I do actually want to share something myself. I pulled up their map once they mentioned they had a map of their projects.
You want to take this down? You can put that up.
Yep. All right. So I have one project in particular highlighted because I used to live in this area in Saurita when I was attending community college. And I want you to pay attention to this yellow line as I retrace like my path to get to community college. So I used to come from all the way up here, up this tiny road to Saurita Road, and then go all the way. So I'm going to zoom out a bit to Houghton. And then there's Houghton, and then I would take Houghton up to I-10. So this one new road cuts out all of this travel here and gets to I-10 this way. But and this is this is absolutely insane for Saurita in specific, getting to I-10 east for certain. But when we look at it regionally, this is the most regional thing I'm seeing here, but there's very little in like Tucson proper going on here. Yeah, there's just this in the third period and then this in the second period. But it's like, this is really the only thing that connects a far out region closer to Tucson. Everything is extremely minor from what I'm seeing.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's a misreading. I mean, there's a lot on the southwest there that is going on.
Yeah, and
that's a fast growing area of Tucson.
Yeah, so this is probably most certainly going to be helpful for this community, but and obviously, you can't go through here. There's a giant mountain here, but like I don't see like bigger connections into Tucson proper from this area. There's definitely like stuff, of course, happening. Like Valencia Road is getting fixed. Is this down by the casino? I imagine this is down by the casino, but I could be entirely wrong. So there's like all these projects are probably good on their face, but there's just so many questions on like, should Tucson taxpayers be paying for the majority of this? Is this the right way to go about things in the current political environment? And like the one lady, Vanessa, just said, is this going to reduce emissions, which people care about? Is this going to make things more affordable? And long term, short term, it's no guarantee on either way. It's just the status quo ultimately.
And well, I think what you're looking at right there is pretty much a picture of the Achilles heel of this program. If Tucson voters don't back it strongly, it's not going to pass. And you just looking at the map, and there's not a ton there for people in the core of Tucson to go, oh yeah, I would like to see that. That seems exciting. I'm not sure if this is a comprehensive view of all the projects that they have going on. There's probably lots of smaller ones that are in there. For instance, I don't see the Mountain Avenue thing that I was talking about earlier, but that's certainly part of it.
It has all the way up to Project 31. Don't know why it would be missing projects, but I think there's 36, right?
Yeah, that's what he said.
Okay, so that's an interesting footnote about his map. So maybe there are 5 more projects that are, who knows, maybe they're all in Tucson, and this would completely change this picture.
Yeah, but I do think we're looking at an Achilles heel of the plan is that there might not be enough in there for Tucson voters to feel okay, sending their half-cent sales tax out to all the regions in the area and not get a lot themselves.
No, and it's like, like I was saying, this is insane for Saurita, but like we talked about, this type of road does nothing but encourage urban sprawl. It makes it more desirable to live in a place like Saurita. But even then, it's like I'm also thinking here, like outside of getting to Irvington for like the community college that I went to, you're just going to go straight up I-10 if you wanted to get to this area. I can't imagine a scenario I can't even imagine somebody in Green Valley wanting to go all the way over here to get up this way. No, they're always going to take I-19 to I-10.
Yeah.
So it's just like
a lot of those interchanges along I-19 are kind of fakakta. So yeah, it's definitely needed stuff. But whether or not it's something that Tucson voters are going to go for,
no,
I don't know.
Indeed. Oh, we will find out sometime in March.
Yes, you certainly should. I've got mine are sitting out in the mailbox right now. I just got to go pick them up.
Yeah, I got my ballots a couple days ago. I believe everybody, even if they aren't a normal mail-in ballot, got a ballot mailed to them, right?
I think, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think this is an all mail ballot, isn't it? It's all mail in.
Yeah, so there's no way to vote in person?
I don't know. There might be some limited voting centers set up, but generally these city elections are set up to be mostly or primarily 90% of people vote that way.
Yes, I got my mail ballot. You got yours. It's going to be interesting to see, but we got basically an entire month from the date of recording.
Yeah.
But I think that's
I
going
still
to
haven't
be.
made up my mind either, quite frankly. I mean, I'm still open to be convinced by either side, but right now I'm just not seeing enough in it for where I live in Tucson. Just from a personal, selfish standpoint, I'm not seeing this going to benefit Tucson as much as it's going to benefit some other areas. And, I don't know, might vote no.
Yeah, I lean towards no, but potentially some things could change my mind. Again, if I really felt like the alternative of local areas creating their own plan would fall through and like we would to lose the streetcar, for example, that could convince me. But like I also wouldn't want to be threatened into voting for something I don't really like. So yeah, I'm probably a lean no at this point, but it is a very difficult choice in this period of time because it isn't like there's nothing in here that's truly bad. It just nothing in here is exciting or does anything to change the status quo.
Yeah, well put. All right, well, let's leave it there. Thanks for joining us here at Inside Arizona. Please hit the notification bell, subscribe, whatever you do on the YouTube there to improve our algorithmic standing. We appreciate it.